All right, we're rolling.
Cool.
Eric Brakey,
Yeah, glad to be here.
thanks for coming.
Pleasure's all mine. You got a nice little spot out here in the woods.
Yeah, thank you.
Turn down the road, and all of a sudden the cell phone service goes out. Find the whole way driving from Dover. Then you turn down your little road, and it's like, all right, I know I'm.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
They want to put a cell tower down the road. I'm not too thrilled about it. I like the little dead zone that I live in.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's kind of like a nice double-edged sword, right? To be forced to disconnect a little bit, unless you manually decide, all right, I'm going to connect to the Wi-Fi network or all that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I contacted you because I saw that you're living in New Hampshire now.
Yeah, that's right. I'm serving as executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, and been doing that for about a year and a half now, and that's following about 12 years in Maine politics.
And you were a state senator for 2 terms?
3 terms, but non-consecutive terms. I did 2 terms, then I left, spent 2 cycles running for federal office, and then came back to the state senate for a final term, and I realized, there's new crop of leaders coming up. I didn't feel as essential, and I also felt like Maine's on a pretty hard road right now, and I didn't. Whereas kind of what's been being built in New Hampshire over the last 22 years as the Free State Project has been here, bringing more libertarians into the state and reinforcing, I think, the naturally kind of libertarian political culture of New Hampshire against, I think, kind of the other kind of really competing political philosophy is this kind of Elizabeth Warren style, almost kind of like secular Puritanism.
It's almost like 2 extremes now.
Yeah. And I think that in most states in New England, you see that this kind of left-wing progressivism has taken over, and New Hampshire is the only state that has managed to rebuff that. And there've been a lot of elections where it's been really close, and things have just, you could maybe count out like the difference in the state legislative races and how many votes, were the difference between, one party having the majority or the other, and you might find it's only a couple hundred votes spread out across a couple districts. Same thing happened in Maine, but things split the other way, and things compounded in a pretty bad direction over time. But in New Hampshire, it's kind of amazing to see, particularly since 2020, the way that New Hampshire has. New Hampshire's always kind of distinguished itself, with the New Hampshire advantage, no income tax, no sales tax, but the last half decade, really, it's been amazing to watch the progress on matters of freedom, from school choice to the first state with a strategic Bitcoin reserve to eliminating the vehicle inspection mandates. So many different areas where the war for liberty is being won by inches.
It's definitely been a good year in some aspects in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
I think the vetoes that we saw the other day were kind of a upset to a lot of people as far as parental choice goes.
Yeah, I saw that. I certainly, I haven't looked into all the specifics on the bills, but from a big picture view, it certainly it seems disappointing that she would veto those. But it does also feel a little bit like, once you've signed into law universal school choice with universal access to education freedom accounts, it's like, okay, I don't know. It seems like people lost the battle and they're complaining about that, but they won the war,
think
right?
So.
Yeah, when the monopoly government schools are no longer a monopoly, the stakes are a lot less high on all these kind of strange, bizarre, woke policies that they are implementing, because now all of a sudden families can leave and say, well, I'm going to take my EFA funds and go elsewhere. And now these schools have, that have really, all institutions and all people respond to incentives, and the incentives in a lot of these government schools have been to care a lot more about what the teachers union thinks and what the political establishment thinks and what families think. Well, now with school choice and education freedom accounts, they have to care what families think. Now there's a marketplace for education, and parents and families can vote with their feet. So I expect that with school choice in place, you're going to see naturally a lot of these government schools, whether you have state policy or not, saying, don't have this crazy stuff in the libraries. Have some more common sense when it comes to, gender in sports programs. I imagine there's going to be a natural kind of market incentive now for schools to pull back from some of this, or else they're going to lose their students.
Mm-hmm. They don't seem to be losing funding, though. And that's basically what everybody's still paying for with public schools. So even though people can have that incentive to take their kid out of school and keep them away from the things that they don't like, they still have to pay the bill when they pay the taxes.
Yeah, certainly with the property taxes especially. I know that's, for watching from the outside looking in, and I still consider myself a novice when it comes to New Hampshire politics. I'm an expert on Maine politics, but New Hampshire I'm still learning quite a bit. But it does seem to me that that's got to be the next thing to tackle. It's been nice to watch how kind of the Liberty Coalition in the legislature has abolished all remnants of the income tax. There's already no sales tax, and like the property tax is the last thing to crack. And it is amazing to look at. I'm not sure who came out with it, but these numbers that as student enrollment has declined in the government schools over the last 20 years, that the per pupil cost has almost doubled. And I think this is a familiar trend you see in government schools all around the country, right? It's the bureaucracy grows. There's always clamoring for, we need more money. Look, the teachers have to buy their own school supplies, for the kids because we're not giving them enough money. Well, it seems like the more money you funnel in there, why does it never seem to make it to the classroom?
Or it's never enough.
Yeah, it's right. There's a thing in politics and government, as they call it, the Washington Monument Syndrome, and it's basically the idea whenever there's talk about like government cutting spending, there's an incentive among the political class to cut not fat, but cut muscle, right? Make it hurt, right? Cut the thing that people want the most.
Make them,
right? It's like when there's a government shutdown, the first thing we do is
close the parks.
Yeah, shut down the Washington Monument. That's why it's called the Washington Monument Syndrome. Mm-hmm. It's like why shut down? Why is that the first thing you cut? Well, because that's what people care about. Mm-hmm. It's a way to kind of hold people, hostage a little bit. And people say, well, boy, I didn't realize that if we cut spending, we were going to have to fire teachers or fire firefighters. Why are bureaucrats never the ones who are fired, right?
Right.
It's
the military won't receive their paychecks.
Right. It's always to go after the things people care about, so that people will relent and say, fine, raise my taxes. And that's why there will never be enough money for school supplies, and teachers will always have to buy school supplies for the kids, because if they ever allocated enough money for the teachers to not have to buy school supplies, then they wouldn't be able to use that argument next time they want to raise your taxes. Yeah,
that makes sense. It's kind of dirty too, isn't it? Huh?
I mean, it's government is a dirty game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a violent institution, right? It's how you legitimately steal from people and pass yourself off as a good guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually lived in Maine when you were running for for Senate.
For U.S. Senate?
Yeah, 2018, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, how much do you think Maine's politics have changed because of ranked choice voting? Do you think that's played a part in it at all?
I mean, a little bit. I think it's overstated. I think certainly you do have the one example in 2018 when the first year that ranked choice voting was implemented. You had the congressional race in the 2nd district, the Northern District of Maine, which is about 80% of the geography of the state. And you had a Republican incumbent, Bruce Poliquin, who won on the first round, but lost under the rules of ranked choice voting. And the Democrat Jared Golden, who's still there, was put in his place. And what was I think a legitimate grievance for a lot of people is that when ranked choice voting was passed at referendum in Maine. It was rejected by the people of the 2nd District, and it was put in place by, basically it being popular in the 1st District. So when you think about it that way, right, it's almost like the 1st District got to choose the 2nd District's congressman. Because the 2nd District didn't want to elect their congressman under these rules, and that's what they were forced to do. And I do think that it does add a layer of complexity that, for me, it's always seemed pretty simple. Like, I don't know. I don't get what's so hard about you kind of rank 1, 2, 3 based on your preferences. But for a lot of people, particularly older people who've been voting for a particular way for, decades and decades, it persists as an item of confusion. And there's also kind of a lot of, and because of kind of the differences, there's kind of a lot of myths that kind of creep in and create additional confusion about, like, oh, if I don't rank a second choice, then they're going to throw my ballot out on the second round. It's like, well, no, they're just going to count if your first choice person is still in the running. They're going to count it. But people get confused by these things. So it has, at least in the early years, I would imagine still having some effect. Ironically, for all the Democrats would accuse Republicans of voter suppression, it had an effect of voter suppression, particularly among older voters who were confused by it.
Now, if you filled it out improperly, though, because you have to choose, are you required to choose over there in Maine? If you have 3 options, are you required to choose one of each?
No, you're not required to choose. You're not required to choose. If you just rank one choice, and your choice was the Republican or the Democrat, who frankly is going to be in the top 2 in 99 times out of 100 anyway. Like, they're never even going to look at your second choice because your candidate's not going to get knocked out of the running until the final. Your candidate's going to make it to the final round. It's the independents and third party candidates who tend to get 1 to 5% if they're really exceptional, who get kind of taken out of the running. And I do think, kind of from a libertarian perspective, I think a lot of libertarians have kind of embraced ranked choice voting because they think it's a way to make people more open-minded about voting for a third-party candidate. But there's an argument to be made actually that it actually takes away one of the few powers that third parties have, which is the power to play spoiler. I've long advocated for libertarians to, I'm an advocate for working through the Republican Party. I think it's a more effective vehicle. But to my friends who insist on working through the Libertarian Party, I tell them to certainly curb their enthusiasm about the prospects of winning, but that there is some power in. Let's say you have a terrible Republican, let's pick on Lindsey Graham. I love to pick on Lindsey Graham. I think he's one of the worst. And I would give this advice to Elon Musk as well, who's talking about starting a third party, the America Party, right? Say, you got to play in the Republican primaries if you want to get better people in. You've got to field candidates there and challenge the terrible incumbents in the Republican primaries. And if you really insist on having a third party as part of your strategy, then make it like a pincer attack. It's like run the candidate in the primary. If your candidate loses, and have a candidate to challenge them in the general and play spoiler, and make it very clear to the political establishment in the Republican Party that you're going to nominate better candidates who are more in alignment with liberty, or we will throw the election to the Democrats. And I don't like the idea of Democrats winning, but sometimes if it's someone as terrible as Lindsey Graham, who's as bad as a Democrat and sometimes worse.
What's the difference?
Exactly. And you get rid of him for one term, and then you come back the next term and you can flip it. But oftentimes, I think we are told the more establishment narrative is told to us that we have to get on the back of the bus for terrible candidates because they're not as bad as the other person. So it's like, well, all right, we'll speed towards the cliff at 60 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour. We're going over the cliff one way or the other. But I'd rather embrace strategies that help us turn away from the cliff.
I had Tom Mannion on.
He's great.
And Matt Drew on recently, and both of them are free staters. And one of the things that Tom Mannion had said is that the Republican Party in New Hampshire is basically a bunch of Ron Pauls. And you have your start with the Ron Paul campaign. Is that when you got involved in politics?
Yeah, that's when I got involved far more beyond just it being like a curiosity that, I was fascinated with when I was younger. But yeah, Ron Paul campaign, and I got kind of the bit by the bug during like the Tea Party wave.
Yeah. Would you credit what we're seeing today with all the liberty-minded Republicans in New Hampshire? Would you credit that to the Ron Paul movement?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the Ron Paul movement and his two campaigns in 2008 and 2012 are what revitalized the libertarian movement and is a big part of the successes that the libertarian movement is having today. And by libertarian movement, right, thinking outside the Libertarian Party, that's a whole other thing. But the broader kind of the success of the philosophy and advancing politically through the Republican Party or otherwise can be traced right back to the Ron Paul campaign. And certainly while the Free State Project preceded the Ron Paul campaigns, the Free State Project has been going since the early 2000s.
Yep.
Ever since Governor Benson invited the Free State Project to select New Hampshire. It was not really until like 2008 and 2012 that the Free State Project really started taking off, as far as political success anyway. And those Tea Party years, I think, are when you start to see kind of some of the first kind of Free Staters starting to get elected to the legislature, and kind of really building kind of in the middle of the decade, 14 and 16. And taking us to where we are today.
Can you give people a breakdown of what the Free State movement is?
Yeah. So the Free State Project began 22 years ago, and it was libertarians who rejected the failed strategy of the Libertarian Party, the national strategy. This idea that wherever you are, we're going to run libertarians for office, and we're going to persuade people to vote for libertarians, and we'll get libertarians elected to Congress and the presidency, and this has been going on for almost half a century, and they had no victories. Right? And there's nothing to show for it, not on the national level. The only places you had victories are libertarians who ran as Republicans, like Ron Paul, who served 30 years in Congress. So the Free State Project said, all right, there are not enough libertarians in any one place to, while this country was founded on libertarian ideas, there are not enough libertarians in any one place to have a real impact on the politics and the culture and the way we would need to shift things and to have victory. So, but there are millions of libertarians out there. There's maybe 3 million in the country. If you go by kind of just by like presidential voting histories and stuff like that. And so what if instead of having kind of libertarians just all be where they are, what if we concentrated in a single place and we achieved the numbers where we could have an impact on the politics and the culture in a very measurable, tangible way? Of course, key to this strategy is to pick a place that already has strong libertarian culture and roots. So you're not like trying to radically change anything from what's already there, just adding some natural support to kind of the native culture. There was a whole selection process for what state would be picked. Wyoming was the second runner-up, but New Hampshire was ultimately selected for a number of reasons. One, it is the live free or die state. This is these libertarian values are something that the state has long said that people many people already embrace here. And over the last 22 years, thousands have made the move from around the country. And today, it's contributed to kind of libertarians controlling about half of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives in New Hampshire. I think our friends at the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance would say there's 98 kind of libertarians currently serving in the state legislature between the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly in the House, the Liberty faction is probably the single biggest kind of ideological coalition within the Republican caucus. So when Tom Mannion says like the Republican Party of New Hampshire is basically all a bunch of libertarians, I wouldn't say it's all, but
Right.
I would say it's, it's certainly, I think it's
more prominent here than others.
Yeah, I think it's certainly, at least in the legislature, and certainly in the House of Representatives, it's more that than any one other thing you could point to. All political parties are built on coalitions, but this has become a very big part of the Republican coalition in New Hampshire.
Do you think that the influence from the Free State Project and the Libertarian Republicans have influenced more older Republicans, older style Republicans, like establishment Republicans, to be more liberty-minded?
Yeah, Ron Paul used to have a saying that the worst thing about the establishment is that they only care about winning, and the best thing about the establishment is that they only care about winning, right? And I think that for kind of a lot of the Republican establishment, I mean, I think you look back in the history, and there was certainly a lot of fighting and gnashing of teeth of kind of the libertarians coming in and the influence of the Free State movement. But I think probably a lot recognize now that a big part of the reason why Republicans have the trifecta in New Hampshire, unlike every other state in New England, which is, I can't even think of another state in New England where Republicans have even just one of the houses of the legislature. It's like Democrat control all over, and we're not talking about the 90s Democrats when they still believed in freedom of speech and civil liberties. The Free State movement and this in-migration of people who believe in constitutional liberty principles has helped turn the tide, and has been right. It's you could have all the support in the world, but if you fall 100 votes short in an election, there's no second place trophy. And we've had some close elections in New Hampshire, and certainly the in-migration from libertarians, and the ability for libertarians to become part of the Republican coalition and not to be alienated from the Republican Party like some other states have done with libertarians. It certainly seems to me that Kelly Ayotte, I think, seems to understand that. Right, she lost her U.S. Senate seat when
2016.
Was that 2016? Aaron Day, a Free Stater, ran against her as an independent candidate, and upset about her vote on, I think it was Medicaid expansion or something like that in Congress. And of course, she was also pretty bad on foreign policy, neoconservative. So she lost her reelection because she failed to bring the libertarians into her coalition. In fact, she actively alienated them. I think she learned that lesson this go around, and she certainly has seemed. I think there's a recognition. We can kind of quibble about her vetoes and stuff like that, but I think certainly there was a recognition in campaign season that these folks are part of the Republican coalition now, and you need to work with them.
She lost by, I think, 800 votes that year.
Yeah, and there's no second place trophy.
Exactly.
You could lose by 800 votes. You could lose by 8,000 votes. It's all the same.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying to see how hard Maine has moved to the left over the last 10 years. Because I feel like 10 to 15 years ago, Maine was more like New Hampshire was. They had the sales tax and they had the income tax, but they didn't have the gun restrictions that they have. You didn't have, you still had religious exemptions for vaccines.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more government involved in people's lives over there than there ever has, I think, and it should be a warning to the people in New Hampshire of how things can go.
Yeah. It's a real tragedy what's happened to Maine.
Referendum voting is a big thing to do with that. Has a big part to play in that too, because it's easy to get something on the ballot if you get enough votes or get enough signatures, and all you have to do is convince the large population to vote for it. They can make it sound good. They can make you feel good to vote for it, and not really think about the consequences that can come from it.
Yeah, it's referendums in Maine have been a real double-edged sword. I mean, I personally think there are some issues referendums are great for, certain social issues where it's like, gay marriage, or should cannabis be legal or not in the state? Like, I think those are appropriate questions for like the people to be able to weigh in on, particularly when kind of the legislature is dragging its feet. But then there are like issues that are, like more nuanced, tax policy, for example, right? So in Maine, they the teachers unions pushed a referendum to say we're gonna, for a 3% surcharge on all people who make over $100,000 a year, extra 3% income tax on them to fund the schools, right? So that kind of class warfare kind of can be kind of appealing to people. It's like, well, I'm not going to be paying this tax. I don't make $100,000, and so that passes. Drives more people out of the state who were already paying some of the highest income taxes in the country. It's a lot of these things are actively detrimental. There is a reason for having a legislature of people who can do the deep dives and look at the issues kind of on a deeper level. Having been in the Maine legislature, I wish more of the legislators actually approach their job that way rather than just kind of doing what they're told and actually even read the bills in the first place. But ideally, I mean, that's how a legislature should be functioning, kind of being able to do kind of the deeper dive and understanding the nuances of these issues in a way that the average person just doesn't have the time and the mental bandwidth to do. I mean, that's why we have representative governments like, hey, you go figure this out, you do the reading, you do the deep dive, and make decisions for us. And ultimately, if we don't like the decisions that you make, we'll throw you out and we'll put someone new in to represent us. But yeah, the referendum process has been a real double-edged sword in Maine. Probably more for the worse than for the better. But another piece of this in Maine has been, I find that the people of rural Maine and kind of northern Maine, the second district of Maine, I actually find it be very culturally similar to a lot of the people that I've gotten to know in New Hampshire.
Absolutely.
With one difference is the difference is it's like people who've been economically oppressed for 40 years versus people who've been in a state of relative economic freedom for 40 years. And there's a certain, I guess, outlook. I mean, when I left Maine, it's just like an air. Like it's just, you can feel it in the air. It's just like there's just this sense of despondency, this sense of like, what does it even matter? People not feeling like in control of their own destiny. Whereas in New Hampshire, it's like you cross the border and suddenly you feel that like lifting off your shoulders, and you feel like I can build what I want. I can make what I want. The future is what I choose to make of it.
Do you think our politicians are held more accountable in New Hampshire than they are in Maine?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Because people are very energized in New Hampshire.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly look at some of the federal politicians that New Hampshire elects. I don't feel like that's necessarily the case, but I'm hoping that change is coming there in the long run.
And why do you think that happens? Why is it that we can have a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, but all of our federal politicians are all Democrats?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, my theory is that change happens gradually and from the bottom up. At least sustainable change does. I look at all of these state legislators, nearly 100 kind of libertarian state legislators, and I think, well, that's a pretty deep bench of people who could be future U.S. senators or future congressmen. The challenge, of course, is in New Hampshire that to win a house, a state house seat, you don't actually have to learn anything about fundraising or running a campaign on like a larger scale, And it's nice that it's actually very accessible to the common person, right? A couple $100 and some yard signs and some shoe leather, you can like win a race. It doesn't necessarily kind of set people up for kind of this kind of skill sets that you need to have to run for higher office. So there is a kind of gap that needs to be overcome there. But other factors, I think that there is. I think probably like in Maine, there's like a core like swing group that of people who, when they go out to vote, they like to think of themselves as independent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think probably as a matter of pride, there's like ballot splitting. Well, I'm going to, I don't want an income tax in New Hampshire, so I'm going to vote for the Republicans here, but vote for the Democrats on the federal level because I'm an independent, right? So I think there's an element there. And I also think there's just an element of, on the federal level, it's such a different ballgame. On the state level, grassroots politics and shoe leather counts for so much. When you run federally, I mean, I found this when I was running in Maine. I could knock on every door in my district for state senate. I could raise, $80,000 and run kind of one of the best funded campaigns in the state for a state senate seat. And, I could form those direct relationships with my constituents and my voters that oftentimes overcame, if they spent $500,000 against me, the direct relationships I built with voters, face-to-face interaction could overcome all of that. But when you're running in such a large territory, when you're running to represent 500,000 people or statewide over 1 million people, you can't go and knock on every door. You don't build relationships in the same way. You've got to stay in the office and you've got to dial for dollars and try to raise money from donors to pay other people to go out and knock doors. And
so that's the big game.
That's a big part of it. And when you are a grassroots candidate versus the more establishment candidates, your opponents literally have access to a money printing machine. I mean, this is the way the system works. They've got the Federal Reserve Bank. The Fed prints trillions of dollars out of thin air. Congress appropriates that new money out to all their special interest friends, and then the special interest give them a cut by redirecting a portion of those funds to their PACs and political parties and campaigns. And so it's a whole money laundering operation.
Is that illegal?
I mean, it depends on what legal code you're asking me about. If you're talking about natural law and what John Locke and Thomas Jefferson believed in, yeah, it's illegal because it's stealing. You're violating people's property rights by eroding the currency and stealing the value of their savings, and then redirecting it. But is it illegal under kind of the laws that Congress writes for themselves? No, because it's right. Because Congress has we're under a fiat currency and they've long transitioned us away from sound money where they can print them, where they can have they can print the money. They have the power to budget the money to wherever they want, and then the people who get the money they have the right to donate to support whatever candidates believe will advance their interests. So it's morally corrupt. The system is corrupt, but I don't know how you could prosecute anyone for that under the laws as they are. If we went back to sound money, problem would fix itself.
Do you think that the internet could help combat that? Because you can reach more people with the internet.
Yeah, certainly. I certainly think that. Yes. I think Ron Paul was one of the first candidates who really managed to tap into kind of the internet culture and be able to use. I guess Barack Obama was similar. Well, I hate comparing them to because they're so dissimilar in all the ways that matter. But like in terms of tapping into that internet culture and kind of internet communities in like the in the early days when social media was taking off, that's definitely the case. I mean, Donald Trump basically tweeted his way to the presidency, so that's certainly the case.
AOC as well.
Yeah, though I do find it's still a little bit like catching lightning in a bottle. It's doable. It's rare. It's difficult to do, and 90 times out of 100, the system is still rigged in such a way that the advantage always goes to incumbents.
In New Hampshire, I don't know how much does a state rep in Maine get paid?
More than New Hampshire.
Is it like $8,000?
I'm trying to remember how much. No, I mean, it honestly, like, people complained about it, but at least as a young man, it wasn't. You know, when I was young, I was 26 when I was first elected. You know, working 6 months out of the year in the legislature and going home to a 1-bedroom apartment wasn't married yet, no kids to take care of. It was fine. I think it was maybe averaged out to like $3,000 a month when maybe a little less when we were in session. So, you know, and they just voted to raise legislative pay in Maine. I voted against it. I actually wanted to see legislative pay tied to the overall economy.
Yeah.
Like it should be based on like the median income of the average Maine person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could do like performance pay for legislators. Like, hey, if you're succeeding at making the state more prosperous, then the legislature can get a pay raise. But if the state is becoming less prosperous under your watch, then you're going to get a pay cut. They didn't want to do that, so they just voted themselves a raise.
So in New Hampshire, it's $100 a year.
Yep.
And the average cost, they say, is $5,000. But I had a state rep on last week, and he said that he spent $40,000 on his seat in Bedford. And I've heard that there's a lot of state reps that have spent upwards of $50,000 for a state rep seat in New Hampshire, which to me is a lot of money for something that pays $100 a year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of special interest already in New Hampshire to try and change New Hampshire to a blue state, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because he said he self-funded most of his campaign.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how much different do you think it is from New Hampshire to Maine? Because you have more money involved. Like in Massachusetts, I think their state reps make like $100,000 a year. Something crazy.
Yeah. A lot of states, it's wild to hear how much legislators get paid in certain states. And just like I hear about, you know, states where it's like a full-time legislature and they have their own office and their own staff, like full-time, like multiple full-time people just to serve like one legislator. I mean, in Maine, at least, you know, I had a legislative aide, but I shared him with like 4 other senators.
Oh, that guy must have been busy.
Yeah, and you only had your own office if you were like a committee chair. But still, that was certainly more than in New Hampshire. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty wild to see how much money is spent in a lot of legislative races, but it is a function of, you know, what are they trying to buy, right? You know, the more power we give to the government, the more expensive the races are going to be because the stakes become higher, and there's more and more interests who are fighting for control of that power to influence the laws that govern the economy and to hand out favors.
So what are some of the things that the Free State Project is working on right now in New Hampshire?
Yeah, well, I should distinguish between the Free State Project, which is a 501c nonprofit educational organization, and the Free State Movement overall, which is just the people who are here and building things and forming community. I mean, the Free State Project, like, our mission is to just basically market New Hampshire to libertarians outside New Hampshire and get more people to come visit and experience what's being built here and to make the move and join us and to plug in and engage with projects and community events that are going on all the time around the state.
So as an organization, you would say that you were focused more externally to bring people in than what's going on in the state?
Yeah. I like to tell people we do not have a central plan. Like if you're looking for someone to tell you this is the central plan for what all the Free Staters are doing, and you know, there's no one with that. There's no central plan. It's just come here and you know, commit to doing the most you can to the degree most practical to advance the idea of a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. And within those parameters, there are a million different paths people can pursue, and people do. Whether it's people pioneering cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, I think there's a reason why, like the early innovators in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin were disproportionately here in New Hampshire. It's because of that kind of Ron Paul ethic of challenging central banking and the fiat system, or people building homeschool networks, or community improvement projects. I know like people out in Manchester started this group called like We Heart West, and they basically just like cleaning up parks that the local government has neglected over time. And then, of course, there's people who do the political thing and they run for office and they try to advance liberty policies. So there's a million different ways people can pursue liberty. We don't tell people which way to do it. We just try to get more people here to plug into ongoing projects and efforts and encourage people to build liberty the way that they'd like to see it. And I ultimately think that that's the lack of a central plan, the fact that the movement relies on a certain degree of spontaneous order, of people finding their own way and doing their own thing. I think that's ultimately why it's so effective. There's no like one person you can discredit or take down and say, all right, we've cut off the head of the Free State movement. It's a maximally individualist movement.
I remember 10 years ago, there was a lot of attacks towards the Free State Project from Democrats, and their whole argument was that the Free State Project wants to overrun the state and eliminate the government, and it was just basically fear tactics that there would be no government whatsoever. And I feel like right now with a lot of these the bills that have gone through for like state zoning, there's a lot of negativity being pushed towards the Free State Project now as well. But now it's coming from Republicans saying that it's more like a New World Order, Agenda 2030 overtake of the government. So now it seems like it's gone in the complete other direction. So
those are some voices, and I will say certainly within the Free State movement itself. I mean, there are people with different views on zoning. I personally think that I think that the zoning. I mean, I think a lot of the zoning stuff can get really out of control. I mean, the degree to which people have to beg and plead to do stuff on their own property. It's like, I'm sorry, the world's not going to end because someone could build an accessory dwelling unit, like, and let their mother-in-law, stay there. It's, I get that there's a balance, but it's, I guess I just speaking for myself here. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who want to use state power, government power, to tell people what they can do on their own property. It's like, if you want to dictate the terms on what happens on a piece of property that isn't yours, you should buy it.
I agree. You're not paying the taxes on it.
Yeah.
It's not your property, and people shouldn't be able. Now, if what you're doing does impose some sort of nuisance to your neighbors,
if there's in property rights theory, there's these ideas of different kinds of pollution. As an example, right? If you're dumping garbage in your neighbor's yard, you are violating their property rights. Or if you are blaring loud music, you're violating your neighbor's property rights. There are considerations there, and but to say that, like, when you look around the state and you see a lot of these like minimum lot sizes, that seem just designed to try to freeze us in a certain state of time that just, life is change. And it doesn't mean that things are going to change radically all at once, but how do you have a future as a state if your kids can't afford to live here because you can't build anything new anywhere?
Right.
I mean, that's I think that, people are finding ways as best as they can, but it's like, it is,
it's tough.
Yeah. I think we gotta make some space for the next generation to be able to stay in New Hampshire.
Now the cost of living has gone up
Mm-hmm.
a lot. The average cost of a house in New Hampshire has gone up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that do you think is related to our monetary policy?
Yeah, there's a number of factors, but I think that the monetary policy is a big part of that. So I mean, there's the general effect of, hey, when you counterfeit the currency, the dollar loses its value, and prices are going to go up on things, and they're going to go up disproportionately in some areas more than others, depending on where people are putting their money, all this new money. And I think that also that the lack of sound money does kind of create a situation that is, it's very understandable. I think for a lot of folks, a lot of middle class folks, we can't save our money by just putting our money in our dollars in a bank account, because if you do that, maybe you're getting a little bit of interest, but the dollar is losing its value, its purchasing power faster than anything. You're getting there. And so for a lot of people, home equity has become their savings account, right? For the middle class, it's like, all right, we're gonna park our money in the value of our home and expect that our home is going to increase in value year to year to year. But that's a very unnatural thing to happen. I mean, you don't buy a car and expect it to increase in value over time. You're going to use the car. You're going to use it for what it is. So I think the fact that it kind of, because of a lack of clear ways to save for the future because of this fiat economy, we have created a system where people want and expect housing prices to go up more and more every single year. And then we're also astounded at the same time that housing is really expensive. It's like, well, obviously, like, if prices are going up, that means housing is becoming less affordable. And it also creates an incentive for folks who have a big percentage of their savings wrapped up in their home equity to support policies that create artificial scarcity in housing, because, right, so basic supply and demand. If the demand is going up but the supply is restricted, the price of the good goes up. And if you are a homeowner, then that might seem like a good thing. I mean, I guess until the homeless camps are out in front of your home and people are shitting in the street in front of your home.
But I don't understand what good it does for you. If all the housing prices are going up, if you sell your home, you still need a home. So unless you downsize, some people do once their kids move out.
Yeah.
You're not really making any money off of your house. So you still have to buy a house that's more expensive than it would have been when you first bought your original house.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And certainly when I think about it, I moved into my home in Dover about a year ago now, and I suddenly started getting, cards in the mail from realtors saying, hey, any chance you would be interested in selling your house? I got someone who's looking. And I think, I wonder how much I could ask for. But then I think about,
where am I going to go?
Yeah, where am I going to go?
What's the point?
I'm sure the value's gone up since, or the nominal value, the dollar value has gone up since we purchased it. But so is everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably just a wash.
Yeah. It's something that people really aren't looking that far down the road, especially when you have an aging population. As people start dying off and the population goes down, a lot of these elderly people, I think, that are trying to keep housing from expanding in their community, they don't want their taxes to go up because of it. I've heard the argument that a lot of these people are anti-kid. They don't want the school system to increase their property tax.
How?
And
yeah.
So
yeah.
As these people get older and they start dying off, who's going to pay those taxes anyways if you're not having new people move in?
And how screwed up is our system when we have created the incentive to, like, not want to have kids? Like, I mean, how are we preparing for? So I get it. I get that kind of fear of, like, well, if more families come in, then that's more kids in the school system, and that's creating more tax burden. Like, I get that. I mean, this is like a problem with socialism, right? This is a problem with I think about, like, how Ayn Rand really kind of broke it down in Atlas Shrugged when she did the Tale of the 20th Century Motor Company under like a socialist system where, when under a socialist system where you know it should be when a family has a kid, it's a celebration, right? New life coming into the world. But when that family having a kid means that there's food coming out of the mouth of your family, right? It suddenly becomes puts people at odds with each other. And I feel like that's to some degree with the fear with like how expensive schooling has become, government schooling has become. And I suppose it's a legitimate fear that, is that going to be more money kind of funneling into these socialist systems?
But at the same time,
I guess I'm hopeful that the school choice programs we're building are going to help us transition away from that way of thinking.
But at the same time, as your property value goes up, your taxes are going to go up too.
Yeah,
because it's based off your property values.
Yeah.
So there's really no easy answer to it. You should be encouraging growth. You should be encouraging younger families and population growth. Yeah. And I don't feel like we are right now. And I don't know what can be done other than, the EFAs will help. But if we're still paying the same amount of money for our schools, then our taxes are going to go up again, too. And that's going to be a battle, I think, in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
As the EFAs expand. I think the EFAs are a good thing. Some people don't like them because they think that it's going to bring in more government regulations within homeschool families. But time will tell.
The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. I mean, I saw someone argue that, someone put a bill in to have more regulations over people getting EFA funds, and this proves the danger. It's like, well, anyone can put a bill in at any time. It didn't pass.
Right.
Sure, that's always a danger. Every cycle, so they could try to put more restrictions on people and control, families. But we can keep electing good people who are going to defend education freedom and keep voting that down. You can't. So there's a lot of bad bills put in all the time. The question is, does it have a path to pass? And we've got to defend against that. But it is. I think it's a seismic shift in a good way to just disrupt this monopoly system. And I think that the way that they designed it in the legislature was smart, right? It's in a whole separate chapter of the law from homeschooling, so you could not have a single bill, as I understand it, that puts restrictions on homeschool families without EFA funds and families who are taking EFA funds. So there's a bit of a firewall there. And nobody is compelled to take the EFA funds. If you really think that it comes with too many strings attached, you don't have to take it, and you get to stay in the exact same situation you were before. You don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea now, but the fact of the matter is, so many people are forced to pay for public education. I don't see any viable political path in the short term. Certainly, I think some people say, well, why have school choice? We should just abolish government schools. It's like, okay, tell me what your strategy is to do that. That sounds like letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. It is a seismic shift to put the purchasing power in the hands of families rather than in the hands of bureaucrats and the teachers' unions. It's the same problem that we have in healthcare. To be frank, it's you look at like our really toxic healthcare system in America, and it's because we have a healthcare system that is built on third-party payers. There's an old principle, right? The customer is always right, or the golden rule, as I learned when I was 6 years old watching Aladdin. Jafar said the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules, right? In healthcare and in education, right? All of these are institutions that are serving their customers. The problem is, in education, the family has not been the customer. In healthcare, the patient has not been the customer. In healthcare, it's insurance companies and it's government bureaucracies like Medicare and Medicaid. And that's who gets served, and the patient is the product on the assembly line who gets passed along, and how they feel about the process at the end of the day doesn't actually matter to the bottom line of the healthcare provider, just like how the family feels about how their kids being educated and what they're being taught doesn't ultimately matter to the bottom line of the school district. What matters is, are they going to be able to get the funds from the state? What matters is, are they going to, they keep the teachers unions happy. So putting the purchasing power in the hands of families means that we are creating an incentive structure where the school districts now have to care what families think.
Mm-hmm. Currently, we have more of a dependency on public schools and also Medicare and Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that, I would think, is government intervention has built these dependent Goliaths of these systems.
Yep.
Now, the hurdle is, how do we convince voters that these systems don't have their best interests at heart? Because what they're going to say is, all these libertarian Republicans want to take away all your Medicaid, and they want to make your health insurance more expensive.
Mm.
When in reality, from what we've seen with the ACA, health insurance is more expensive, and it's just put more people on Medicaid.
Yeah.
What's the quality of care that people were getting 15 years ago compared to now?
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest hurdle, is convincing voters that the government doesn't have their best interests at heart.
Yeah, and I think it's an easier sell to people if, it's like the school choice model, right? So when I ran for Congress in 2020, I really ran hard on a healthcare reform plan that I had built, which was similar to kind of the EFA model, right? It was you look at Medicaid, for example, right? One of the big problems with Medicaid is that it's an all or nothing program, right? So it's based on your income, and you qualify or you don't, right? And if you qualify, they cover 100% of your medical costs. If you don't qualify, they cover nothing, right? And so if you are someone who's on the cusp, let's say maybe you've got a part-time job, you're earning under the income thresholds, and then your employer thinks, hey, you're doing a great job, I'd like to give you a full-time job. Well, we've created a system where people have to say,
no, thank you.
No, thank you. Because I will lose more by losing access to Medicaid than I would gain in terms of the paycheck I'm bringing home.
Yeah.
And so we've created a system where people get trapped by this welfare cliff. And so what I have proposed is move towards almost like an EFA model. Like we're not, if we have accepted the premise that taxpayers are going to be paying for health care for people who are indigent, who cannot afford their health care otherwise, we can at least do it in a way that isn't stupid. And right now, we do it in an incredibly stupid way that just empowers bureaucrats and insurance companies. So if you were to take Medicaid dollars and instead put them into a health savings account for the individual that they direct, and they can have direct relationships with their own healthcare providers. One, it's going to bring down the cost of healthcare, because so much of the cost of healthcare is the bureaucracy around healthcare. You walk into your average doctor's office, and there'll be a doctor, and there'll be multiple people whose job it is exclusively to deal with the paperwork that comes from Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance companies. Versus if you go into a doctor in the direct primary care model. I don't know if folks are familiar with direct primary care. These are doctors who basically opted out of that whole bureaucratic system, and you pay them $100 a month, and you can see them as much as you need. And it's like, I know I have a direct primary care physician in South Portland, Maine, and it's basically him and his receptionist. There are not 10 people who he has to pay to process paperwork. It's him and his receptionist. I have a direct relationship with him. When I go in and see him, I get to see him for an entire hour. He cares about my needs because I'm his customer. His customer is not Medicare, Medicaid, insurance companies, right? Imagine seeing your doctor for an entire hour. I know when I've gone in to see doctors with even with private insurance, I'll be lucky if I see them for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I see some like lower level person, anyway. So that's a reorienting of the system when the patient is the payer. Even if we decide that we need to subsidize that, let's at least subsidize them rather than the bureaucracy, and reorient how it works. So not only would that bring down the cost of care, make it more affordable, it also increases the quality of care because they have now it matters to the bottom line how the patient feels and if they're getting their needs met. And one other thing you could do in a system like this is now suddenly Medicaid doesn't have to be an all or nothing 0 or 100% program. You could scale it according to income and disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can eliminate the welfare cliff aspect of it. Now, people won't have to be trapped. If they take a raise at work and they earn an extra $2 and they only lose $1 of their healthcare subsidy, then they have a clear path to work their way towards independence rather than being perpetually stuck as a welfare dependent. And that's where we have so many people in this country trapped right now.
Why can't it just be that simple? Like, well, is it just because the people that are paying all the politicians are in charge, or is it the special interests? They just don't want that. They'll make less money.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole industry. There are a lot of jobs around the third-party middlemen. In the insurance companies, in the Medicare bureaucracy, the Medicaid bureaucracy. Yeah, I mean, these parasitic bureaucracies that have grown up will fight tooth and nail to keep the system the way it is.
Self-preservation,
right? And it's like. I compare it to, it's like 3 gangs of pirates, and it's like they're all pointing at each other. It's like, it's your fault, right? So you have the hospital bureaucracy, you have the insurance bureaucracy, and you have the government, Medicare, Medicaid bureaucracy. And the insurance companies and the I guess these are two sides of the same coin. I guess the insurance companies.
That's the Spider-Man meme,
right? Exactly. Yeah. They say you need us because look how bureaucratic these hospitals are. Like, you would never be able to deal with all of their confusing pay structures and just how crazy is. You need us to be specialists to deal with all of this, right? And the hospitals say, well, we need this entire bureaucracy to deal with with all of them. So I think there was a study that came out years ago that found about 1/3 of the price of healthcare is just bureaucracy.
Wow.
Right. So if you could eliminate that, you're talking about a significant. You're actually talking about making healthcare significantly more affordable. And the problem is, too, a lot of the mandates that are in place around private health insurance and what it has to cover, and the way that health insurance has transformed from, really since World War II, it's not insurance anymore, right? I mean, insurance is, I am covered if something unexpected happens.
Right.
A catastrophic event that I cannot plan for happens. That's what insurance is supposed to be for.
Not routine checkups.
Right. Exactly. And why would you want to pay for health insurance to cover routine plannable events, right? Because when you factor in the cost of bureaucracy, right, it's
cheaper to pay out of pocket.
Right. I am paying an insurance company high premiums for the privilege of them bossing me around in my interactions with my doctor, and while they're also taking a cut.
Yeah.
Right. As much as 33%
yeah.
of the whole transaction is going towards bureaucracy. So how is that better for the patient? How is that better for the doctor? It's not. It's only good for the middlemen, and the middlemen, for the most part, are completely unnecessary to this arrangement. We should be working to restore direct relationships between doctors and patients, and health insurance. I mean, I know the kind of health insurance I would want to get if it was legal again, would just be to have something low premium. If I get cancer or I get hit by a bus, something I can't plan for, that's what you have a risk pool for. And for everything else, I'd love to just be able to save my own money, tax-free, in a health savings account, so I can have direct relationships with my doctor. And when you direct pay for things, you find that it's a lot cheaper. And if there are still people who cannot afford health care under a system like that, well, we have a subsidized system in place. Let's change how that subsidized system works, and let's at least empower the patients and the doctors and not these third-party middlemen.
But it's too politically popular to expand those subsidized areas and offer it to voters. They're buying votes with it, essentially.
Yeah.
Telling people, we're going to give you free health care.
Yeah. I mean, how great is this free health care, though? You're like, it sounds nice, it's free, but your doctor doesn't work for you.
Right. Doctor works for the state.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, so 33% is admin? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was a study that came out several years ago. I saw Bernie Sanders even touting that study as he was arguing for single-payer healthcare on that basis. But, I mean, that's just consolidating power in one bureaucracy. Yeah, which might be maybe even worse because now you can't even choose if the one bureaucracy is dicking you around. Now you can't even choose to go to a different bureaucracy. You're stuck.
Well, they say even if you go back to education keeps going up, but the teachers are making the same. So where's all that money going? It's going to the administration.
Yeah, it's getting siphoned away.
Yeah. So the Free State Project's goal was to get 20,000 people to move to New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, that's the original vision.
How close have they gotten to that?
It depends on how you measure it. I'd say we're probably close to half. Estimates that I've seen range between 7,000 to 10,000. The hard thing is getting hard numbers. Is we have hard numbers on like people who have like declared and identified themselves and said they're making the move. And if we just count those folks, then we're around 7,000. But I also know that there are many people who have moved to New Hampshire aware of the Free State Project, and that's the reason they made the move. But they never like come forward and identify themselves. But I know that they're here, they're voting. I mean, part of my job is wanting to kind of get those people to come out of the woodwork and get involved in the community and engage with projects that are going on. So you factor that in, you could estimate as high as 10,000. So I think what people really underestimated at the outset of the project, though, is how much could be accomplished well before reaching 20,000. I mean, the fact that we're slightly less than halfway there, and already you have a Free Stater who's the House Majority Leader. You have libertarians controlling, 20% of the Senate. The biggest ideological coalition in the House. A ton of policies being passed. Community that is growing strong in all regions of the state. We have like 7 different community clubhouses now in different regions that
really?
Those communities have built. Yeah.
Where are they?
So the first one was the Quill in Manchester. You have the Shell in the Seacoast region. You have the Prickle in Concord. You have the Warehouse in Ware. You have Independence Inn, if you can count that as a clubhouse. That's in Stratford. You have the Praxium, which is also in the Seacoast region, and you have the newest one that just opened up in the North Country in Lancaster is the Pine, named after the double meaning, right? Named after both play on porcupine, which is our symbol, but also in the Free State movement, we really like to harken back to the New Hampshire history, the Pine Tree Riots, and that kind of initial fight for revolutionary independence and freedom and liberty there. So and so the kind of community kind of clubhouses. Some of them are more similar to each other than others, but it's just hubs for community and activity and events, and it's a sign that these different regions of the state and these communities in the state are big enough and organized enough to have these kinds of community centers, and that's not something you find in any other state in the union.
The influx of people that have moved here since COVID, most of them have Republicans, and I would assume that most of them are liberty-minded if they're coming here because of what went on during COVID. So I would say that officially you're not at 20,000, but I'm sure there's far more than 20,000 that are here because they want liberty. It's a contagious idea.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing, right, is that the people who come here tend not to be, like, passive, right? It's not like someone who comes here and kind of casts a vote every 2 years and otherwise sits back and waits for other people to do stuff. The people who come here come to be active, to be activists in many cases, political activists, and to sometimes run for the legislature themselves. And I think the fact that, like, a lot of Free Staters have gotten elected to office with the support of their communities that they're representing, that's not like, everyone there is a transplant, or a Free Stater, or, these are good people who managed to earn the support of kind of their neighbors who maybe not totally libertarian, but there is a kind of a native libertarian ethic here. I think resonates with people. So yeah, it's very nice to see what's happening, and I enjoy reading the love letters in the local papers that the progressive statists are often writing for us about how Free Staters have taken over the Republican Party, and education freedom accounts are a libertarian plot to recruit more libertarian families, and it's sometimes our haters are our best promoters.
Free publicity.
I love it.
Yeah. There's no such thing as bad publicity.
yeah. Well, there can be, but but it's like the things that they complain about us doing are, things we're proud to do. We're proud to advance liberty. We're proud to defeat the government school monopolies. We're proud to expand gun rights and maintain the New Hampshire advantage.
Yeah, New Hampshire's a great state. And I lived in Maine for a little bit, and I wasn't too fond of it. And I was glad to come back and to be back. And that's when I got more involved in politics. And the last election, there were a lot of people from out of state running on the Democrat side. And I'm sure there's a lot of people from out of state, Free Staters, running on the Republican side. But it seems like too many of the progressives want to turn the state into every other state that's around us, and there's a reason people are coming here fleeing those states.
Yeah, and if they really want that,
move back.
Yeah, go to Vermont, go to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish them on Maine because I still love the people of Maine, and I hope that there's some redemption over there. I personally think maybe the only path forward in Maine is for the 2nd District to just break away and join New Hampshire. I think they would fit in well over
Seems
here.
to be a more popular idea.
I've been trying to plant that idea since my last year in the Maine Senate, when I think the writing was on the wall. Just as it's one thing to not to have policies being put in place that you object to, but it's another thing when policies are being put in place to actively disenfranchise your ability to have a say in the process of who governs us. When the 1st District, when the politicians elected by the 1st District of Maine, not just putting in ranked choice voting like we talked about previously, but trying to kick Donald Trump off the ballot.
Yeah.
Trying to put the state into the National Popular Vote Compact to basically give away people's voting rights to big cities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. Like, it's it really seemed to me that the 1st District politicians, with the power that they kind of achieved, we're happy to just, they're embarrassed by the way the people of 2nd District vote, and they want to take that ability and that voice away from them. I'm very fascinated by what's going on in Oregon. There's a movement. Actually, we just had a guy who's the leader of this movement come out and spoke at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum in April this year. The movement's called the Greater Idaho Movement. And it's basically, in Oregon, you look at Eastern Oregon, it's very rural, very conservative. But just like folks in Maine, they've got a Portland problem. In that the state politics is basically dominated by the progressive population center of the state. And so 13 counties in Oregon have voted They want to direct their representatives to work towards their county breaking away and joining Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And the Idaho legislature has, in fact, passed a resolution saying we will gladly take you.
Wow.
So it's been voted on a referendum in 13 counties. The Idaho legislature says, great, we would love to have you, but the progressive regime that rules Oregon has no incentive to let their tax cattle escape.
And they could just hold them hostage like that?
Yeah, well, hey, the people of Killington, Vermont voted 20 years ago, right, to secede and join New Hampshire, and the state of Vermont has never let their hostages go. But who knows? I think as it does feel like in this country we are approaching some kind of breaking point, and I don't know when it will happen and what it will look like, but I think that when we get there will be a lot of assumptions we take for granted that people will be willing to start to rethink. And I wonder if at a point in time like that, if enough people have it in their mind that there is no political solution in Maine to turn things around under the traditional path, but we could break away and join New Hampshire and suddenly get the policies that we've been working for and wanting to have for such a long time, like no income tax, no sales tax, school choice. I mean, gun rights protected. I mean, I imagine
that would be the most peaceful resolution for that issue. For certain counties to be able to merge with other states. And why wouldn't you want that to happen? I mean, otherwise you're going to have disgruntled people in the state paying more in taxes, abide by laws they don't agree with, and it's all coming from this central location that's 2 hours away from them.
Yeah.
That's not going to end well. So you might as well just let people do what they want and become a different state. Like it just makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And
it's a peaceful solution to the problem.
Yeah, it is. And for the folks in New Hampshire who don't want to see New Hampshire masked up, I mean, the people of the 2nd District of Maine would be great reinforcements against that culture creep from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Because the people of the 2nd District of Maine are concerned about the exact same thing, and they've experienced what happens when the state gets masked up.
It's like they're further down the road than us.
Yeah, and it's, like 2018. I mean, there was some optimism for a time in Maine that we had turned a corner. I mean, it'd been 40 years of Democrat Party rule. Then the Tea Party happened. 2010, Republicans took control of the governorship and the House and the Senate, and there was a tug of war for control of the legislature for the next 8 years till 2018. Democrat trifecta came in, took everything, and it's been relentless ever since. And then I think a lot of that hope has died. It is, but you go back to that 2018 election, and you can total it up in Maine. You look at some of the House districts, and you say, where could Republicans have made up the votes to take the majority and stop the bleeding that took place there? And election cycle after election cycle, they break it down and they've said, well, it's like 100 votes, just 100 votes scattered across a few different house districts is the difference between a Republican majority and a Democrat majority. I mean, at least, if you had a Republican majority in the House, there'd at least be some gridlock so they couldn't keep doing these terrible things. But a few hundred votes makes all the difference, and these defeats just compound over time, and the situation gets worse and worse. And then COVID happens when Democrats are in charge of everything, and you have you mentioned this before, the vaccine mandates that were pushed, getting rid of the religious and philosophical exemptions. That's when I saw some of the best people in Maine leave because out of a sense that their children were not safe, and who could blame them? And so you started to see at that point in time some of the best people in Maine start to leave, and in their place, and I think this is a part due to the leadership of Maine at the time, and the Democrat Governor Janet Mills, who was like COVID lockdown queen. A lot of the migration was people leaving states like New York and states where they weren't necessarily opposed to the lockdowns. They just wanted a little bit more elbow room, right? Whereas in New Hampshire, because maybe New Hampshire had embraced kind of a different brand, and a lot of the folks who are coming into New Hampshire were the people who were trying to escape that. And so it's almost like in 2018 and 2020, Maine and New Hampshire kind of split along different paths. I mean, Republicans lost control of the House and Senate in 2018 in New Hampshire as well, but managed to turn it around 2 years later. In some pretty close races where it went a couple hundred votes their way instead of the other way. Whereas Maine, it goes a couple hundred votes the other way. And at this point, it feels like, the state's lost for an entire generation because of some very close races. So I think the Free State movement in New Hampshire has made the difference.
How do you think it'll play out in 2026?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, but I do think the trends are good.
Good.
I think the fact that, we went from a House of Representatives that was razor-thin margins right before this election cycle to Republicans now have 40-seat majority in the House, 2/3 supermajority in the Senate. And not to say I'm not a cheerleader for Republicans overall. I'd like to see some better Republicans in there in a lot of cases. But the trends are good. The trends are good. And I think it was very, very telling that this last election cycle, from what I saw, Republicans campaigned on school choice and Democrats campaigned on school choice is evil, right? It was clear cut.
Anti-choice.
Right, anti-choice. And so if there was a clear mandate on anything from the voters this election cycle, it was they wanted school choice. And I think that, Republicans have delivered on that. I think one of the other big issues has been housing affordability. And I do think that, maybe it's not a popular view with some people, but I do think a lot of the zoning reforms are overall going to be a good thing and are going to help to some degree with housing affordability. And frankly, from what I can tell, again, I haven't looked into it all in depth, but it does seem like the reforms, from what I can tell, are very modest versus what they could be. So anyway.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you for coming by, sitting down with me.
Yeah, and happy to do so.
You're welcome back anytime. And do you want to let everybody know where they can find more information about the Free State Project?
Yeah, here's a few steps you can take if you'd like to learn more. And of course, we welcome native Granite Staters who believe in liberty. In my mind, anyone who believes in a free New Hampshire is a Free Stater, whether you moved here or you were born here. We share a vision for embracing the live free or die ethic, embracing and trying to build a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property, like what Thomas Jefferson believed. Then I consider you a Free Stater and would love to have you involved in our movement and come to our events and get involved with our communities. The best thing to do is to sign up we do a weekly email newsletter, and you can sign up for that at fsp.org. It's a great newsletter. This won't feel like spam, I promise you. You'll love getting this newsletter every single week. You sign up for it at fsp.org. You can also follow us on social media, on X at Free State NH. That's where most active, but we're also on Facebook and TikTok and YouTube and Spotify and different things. I also have a weekly podcast. I imagine folks who listen to your podcast must be kind of people who are into podcasts. So my weekly podcast is called The Porcupine Report. You can find it on all major podcasting platforms. And we also release that on all of our social media channels every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And not only do I share news about things that are going on in the Free State, but every week I do an interview conversation with someone interesting in either the New Hampshire Liberty Movement or the broader nationwide Liberty Movement. Recently, we had on Representative Michael Granger, who gave us the recap of what went on in this legislative session and the passage of his legislation to repeal the vehicle inspection mandate, which is going into law. But we also have a lot of national political figures on. I'm trying to think some folks people would know. Enjoyed, at one point had on Mayor Glenn Jacobs, who's also Kane from the WWE
Big
days.
Red Machine.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and so anyway, it's a mix of good conversations with good people from both inside and outside New Hampshire. So that's the Porcupine Report every Wednesday at 7. Follow us on social media; you'll see it there. And if you sign up for our email newsletter, it'll show up in your inbox every single week.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.